I hold the highest credential as an educator, yet I often felt really stupid when I was young. I often
Mm.
felt like very behind and even still struggling with that imposter syndrome of how did I get here? How am I an advisor on this, right? And I think leading with that is very important because it also is a story of hope, right? For parents of students who are struggling in school.
If education sales has you second guessing yourself, take a breath. This is a trust first, relationship driven market, and the old tactics, they don't translate. This show replaces guesswork with clarity and a customer acquisition system that builds a pipeline you can trust. I'm Josh Chernikoff, two-time education founder with 2 exits and a lead gen coach for companies in education. Through my ed sales elevation experience over the last 2 years, I've coached 210 companies to leads on repeat. In 2025 alone, I delivered over 2,600 hours of coaching to education companies. My co-host is John Gamba. He also has a successful exit, and now he's the Director of Innovative Programs and the Entrepreneur in Residence at Penn's Graduate School of Education. This is the only show dedicated to customer acquisition for education companies, so consistent listeners go from stalled deals to clarity, credibility, and a pipeline they can rely on. This is Ed Sales Edge, where education company founders earn their edge. I've got Dr. Tara Williams here, and we're going to talk to her about the fact that most education founders think credibility comes from credentials, titles, years in the field. Dr. Tara has a PhD. She's a college professor. She built the programs, the teams, and the systems. That's all good. But the moment her credibility really began to click wasn't when she added the letters after her name. Actually, it was when she stopped hiding the part of her story she thought made her less credible. And I'm going to quote Dr. Tara, my friend. She said, "Your story doesn't weaken your authority. It completes it." Lucky enough, we have Dr. Tara with us. So Dr. Tara, welcome to our show.
Thank you, Josh. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning. I'm in the East, you're in the West. So good morning to you. How are you today?
I'm doing great. How about you?
Good. We're going to dive into how credibility is actually built. We're going to talk about why vulnerability creates trust faster than expertise alone, and how education founders can turn lived experiences into real lead generation. So before we get into it, give us a minute of your time and tell us about you, where you're from, and how we got here today.
Okay, well, I grew up in a little town in Florida called Claremont, which used to be a very little town, and now it's a lot bigger. So I grew up in Florida and went to Florida State. And then I started my graduate degree at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville. If you're from that area, that's definitely how you say it.
Cool.
And then I really was unhappy with my graduate program. So I left with another advisor 2 years in, and I went to the University of Sussex in England. So I lived in England for 3.5 years and then sort of bounced around trying to figure out what I wanted to do after my PhD. So I moved to Florida. I quickly realized that wasn't my home anymore, and I live in California now. I'm a tenured chemistry professor at the College of the Canyons, and I currently have an academic consulting business for neurodivergent students.
That's a cool story. Thank you for taking me from Florida to Tennessee over to California. I also want to know and kind of talk through here how you went from a struggling student, because I was that as well, to an academic advocate, which I am not necessarily. So how did you make that transition? Struggling student, academic advocate.
I think as a struggling student, I had to learn early on how to advocate for myself, which was probably still is, but I think back in the 80s and 90s, early 90s, a struggle for most students, right? I think the authoritarian position of teachers is a little different now, but I was
Hmm.
like probably most kids pretty scared of my teachers. So learning to advocate and tell adults like, "Hey, I'm struggling with how you're teaching this. I don't understand it. Can we talk about it in a different way?" Was really difficult for me. And I just kind of also at the same time, as most kids do, just wanted to blend back in, right? I wanted to be just like everybody else. So I didn't stick out in my classes. But I learned to ask questions and advocate. And I had a really huge moment in high school with my geometry teacher who physically put something in my hand, like a
Hmm.
cube. And I was like, oh, this is really different than drawing a cube on the board and being like, this is a cube, right? So, kind of learning that I am a different kind of learner. I'm visual, I'm auditory. Like, I have to hear instructions and see things on those instructions. So, but I just thought that everyone was like that. And then I started teaching in my graduate program, and I was 23, and the students were, some of them were older than me,
Hmm.
some were 18. So I think teaching those students, I had to learn about different ways to get the information across. Especially in chemistry, like you're telling people something exists that they can't physically see, right? I think that that's what makes chemistry so difficult compared to maybe like biology, where we can look at something under a microscope and say that this exists. So while teaching these students, I learned about sort of 504s, which I didn't even know existed at that time. So I learned, okay, well, there are different students with different needs. And even in my educational experience at Florida State, I had a lot of TAs, our teaching assistants, that helped with our class. And I wanted to be the best TA for my students because I had had some that weren't great.
Hmm.
So I learned then that I was going to have to advocate for my students because I had 24 students in a class of 500, right? Like I was just a one portion of their week. But during that time, I really wanted to learn how to be a better teacher, help them when they were struggling. Um, and then the same thing I taught overseas. And then you have a whole different level of students because they're coming from different places. So now you're looking at different cultures versus different ways of learning. And um, after I left school, I started working for a company that worked with students with learning difficulties in sort of subject tutoring. I taught chemistry. And then I realized, wow, like these students really need a lot of help with time management, organization, things that I think a lot of people think just come naturally to students or to people in general, right? So
Hmm.
from there, I really enjoyed it and I wanted to help these students. So I also helped them learn to advocate for their professors with their professors, something I was super scared to do when I was young. And just say, hey, like, we're just people like everybody else. So taking that journey from my own struggle to helping students where they weren't struggling anymore, or if they were, they knew all the resource centers. And also saying, hey, like there's a resource center on campus for this as well. Like learn to advocate for yourself and use all of the resources that are available for you.
That story is so important. That founder's story is so important. Um, and yours is interesting too. But of course, I look at it. You know me. You know from the Ed Sales Elevation experience. I'm very human centered, but I'm also looking at things like, okay, how can we tell our story better so that people understand? Because people, as Simon Sinek, they don't buy what you do; they buy why you do it.
Mhm.
And that story that you just told is why you do it. If something feels fuzzy or momentum has stalled, it happens. I get it. Text me directly, 771 333 4233. I read all of the text messages. Back to the show. So, can you talk about your journey that you have been on with me, with your wonderful friend Caitlin, who I've gotten to know as well? how you lead with your story and not just your resume and your credentials. Yes, they can get attention, and they do, but how your story can create alignment with the families that you work with the universities that you work with. How do you lead with your story and feel comfortable about it?
I mean, as you know, because I worked with you, it was a scary experience, right? I think that, especially in academia or higher ed, we really look at people's resumes, right? And we really look at those letters after their name and the fact that they're a subject matter expert. I think that even students, really see you on this level that maybe they can never become, right?
Mm,
Whereas, they don't see it as like I've had students tell me, "Oh, well, of course this is easy for you. Like you're a chemistry professor." And I'm like, "Well, I
right.
get it, but it wasn't easy when I started, right?" So being able to share the vulnerability of this wasn't easy for me. I really struggled. I grew up at a small town where 504s probably didn't even exist, and if they did, I didn't know what that was, right?
Mm,
And being able to actually say like, hey, I hold the highest credential as an educator, yet I often felt really stupid when I was young. I often
mm,
felt like very behind, and even still struggling with that imposter syndrome of how did I get here? How am I an advisor on this, right? And I
mm,
think leading with that is very important because it also is a story of hope, right? For parents of students who are struggling in school, whether they're neurodiverse or neurotypical, right? That we all struggle in some ways in school, and that me sharing that with them is like, oh, okay. Like there's a story of hope here. It's not just my students never going to be able to do it. And I really have to share that story, and doing it on LinkedIn and finding articles that are similar, or well, I'm sure we'll get to it, but in my book, I talk about my story, which I really didn't want to do
mm.
because yeah, it's hard to say that I struggled in school and now I'm a person who tells you what to do in school.
Yeah. And speaking of struggling, and that happens to be one of my least favorite segues to use, but I'm going to use it here. Um, I watched you come along through the Ed Sales Elevation experience and this amazing personality and story. And I'm like, you gotta tell it. Start on LinkedIn. Just give it a try. It took you a little while, but you got there. And what I am seeing from you is that the consistency of posting, um, first you had to create the internal credibility first. You had to start it to, I think, begin to see how it can affect you and then how it begins to affect others who are engaging with what you're writing. Um, so, talk about how posting regularly uh, can build belief in yourself before anyone else buys in.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the posting regularly gets you comfortable because you have to get
Mm-hmm.
comfortable telling your story if you're going to do it every day and different segments of it. And I know that I struggled with, and we've talked about this, like thinking that LinkedIn was not somewhere to do that because it's not your regular social media. It's not TikTok. It's not Instagram. It's not those where, especially didn't start out that way, right? Like it's
Right.
evolved a lot where I think that building that credibility of being personal and saying, hey, I do this job, but this is why I do it every day, instead of posting something that is very dry and maybe doesn't tell your story. I think, but yeah, posting every day, talking about it every day, like anything else, right? Like it's training your brain. Just like I tell my
Mm-hmm.
students, you can convince yourself of anything if you tell yourself every single day that this is what the truth is. So being vulnerable every day, I think definitely led more people to be like, oh, I didn't know that Tara had that story. Like I just saw her as a person who has this business, or a person who is a chemistry professor, because my profile, everything was very much just this is what I do, not who I am.
Right. Yeah, Alex Hormozy says that entrepreneurship is the most efficient path to personal growth. And I saw a lot of growth from you in the Ed Sales Elevation experience, in terms of doing that posting. But also, one of the things we work through that I think would be helpful for our audience to hear you talk about is this idea that you really got comfortable with solving one problem deeply in your business, and you were able to, I believe, build demand faster. Um, and you don't work with every learner. So talk about the learners that you do work with, and what happened for you, for the learners, for your business, when you said, I'm going to really commit to solving one problem deeply.
Yeah. So I think, as you said, with entrepreneurs and growth, right? Well, I know I do, just as a person, like I get so excited about everything that every great idea that has come my way, I'm like, oh, that sounds great. Let's do that, right?
You and me.
And yeah, and I've learned that doing one thing really well is better than doing five things okay, right?
Mm-hmm.
Especially as you're building credibility as a business owner, as an educator, as when you work with students, especially, and there's that personal relationship. You don't want to just do okay with them. You want them to do well. So for me, really looking at those students who are transitioning to college, who have, used an IEP and are now in a 504 and are, really struggling with that transition, and probably have some kind of diagnosis, whether it's ADHD, AUHD, autism, dyslexia, dyspraxia, right? So
Mm.
really looking at how can we transition those students successfully from high school, where they've had a lot of help, to college, where they now have to help themselves. So focusing there instead of focusing on, oh, let's look at the whole academic journey. Like, let's just start on this one piece, and then we can keep doing those other things well. But this is the most important piece.
And it builds trust.
Mm-hmm.
It, it builds trust to be able to say that the way you just did, so confidently, with empathy, but also confidently. It takes a little while to get there, especially because your mind and your wallet are telling you, well, you're cutting off the majority of your addressable market here, but you get really good and confident and clear at what you want to do. And then you took it a step further and you wrote a book. Before we keep going, a quick pause. Let's talk about credibility. You might not have an offer issue. You might have a credibility challenge. Text the word credibility to the number below. We will send you the exact same framework that we use, that our clients use, to ensure that our credibility walks into the room even before we do. That reduces buyer stress and leads to faster deals. Text the word credibility to the number below. So I'd love for you to kind of talk about the journey of writing a book. And I'm going to sit back, and not that I'm not listening to everything, but one day I'd like to do this as well. But tell everybody what the journey was like writing a book and why you did it.
I mean, I think I know I had been approached a few times about, writing a book. And funny story is that I started out as an English major, wanted to go to law school, and loved writing creatively, but really struggled when people were like, read this story about Hemingway, and then we're going to analyze it. And I really
Mm.
struggled when my professors were like, well, you analyzed it wrong. And so for me, I'm like, but are you Hemingway? Like,
Mm.
who's to tell me that's not the right thing, right?
Right.
So I really struggled with people telling me that my writing was wrong or my thinking was wrong, or sticking me in this box of, hey, this is what they really meant. When I'm like, I don't know how you knew that was. I really struggled in the black and white of it, right? I was always
Mm.
in the color part of it. So when I was approached about it, I was like, oh no, this is going to be like someone telling me what to do and telling me that I'm wrong. Um, but the company that I went with was really much like, no, we really want people to tell their own stories. and we're not going to tell you that it's right or wrong. And so when I initially met with someone and we were developing ideas, I was really like, I didn't really know what I wanted to do or how I wanted to branch it. And then I started by thinking, oh, like I've worked with some wonderful students who have come from like a place where they were really struggling to are now in grad school, work on Wall Street, have all, great jobs and lives. And so, but started out with me like failing out of school, feeling really bad, not having confidence, right? And so I wanted to tell their stories. So we decided to break it up into 5 or 6 chapters of like case studies of where my students started, what we learned along the way and what we used like trial and error, and then how they got to where they are now. And focusing on those superpowers of how they got there, of not seeing a diagnosis as something bad, but as how can I best use that diagnosis as a superpower to be creative in the job field, to even use my hyper focus where it's, I can use it for something amazing. And so from there, everyone was like, well, the first story you have to tell is yours, which I was
Yeah.
like, oh, God, I don't want to do.
No.
I don't want to bring any of that up, right? Like that doesn't
Yeah.
show, it doesn't show the part of Tara that I like everybody to see, right? Like I like everyone to see this like strong, smart, independent thinker. I don't want anybody to see the cracks, right? The vulnerability, the imposter syndrome that we talked about. So, but then as I was writing about the students, I was like, well, I think it's more important than ever to be able to tell people where I came from, right? To show the parents and students who read this book, like it's okay if you struggled. You can even reach the highest part of education if that's really what you desire. You just got to figure out the best way to advocate for yourself and to get there. So yeah. So
Go
that was
ahead.
a
Yeah.
start, right? And then, but writing a book is really hard. Like it's really hard, especially as a STEM person. I wrote a thesis, but it was very like, there's no feelings. There's no, my, my PhD supervisor used to be like, Tara Adams don't have feelings because I would find ways to personify things in my thesis. So, I still remember that saying. So for
Yeah.
me, yeah, it's difficult. It's very long process because you get the words out on the page, you do all of that hard work, and then it's editing, and then it's marketing, and then one thing finishes and the next thing starts. And like most people, I have a job and I have a business and I have things. So, but a very rewarding experience because I do finally feel like I got to tell my story and the stories of these amazing people that I've worked with. And now someone else will get to hear about them as well.
Yeah. I mean, I think at the root of it, it's a process. It's a process. And as entrepreneurs, especially in the beginning, the beauty of our crazy minds is that we can start a business and run in a million different directions. But eventually we have to grab a hold of systems to grow the business, or systems, in your case, to also write a book, maybe in my case one day. Last interruption before we wrap this show. I want to remind you guys the Ed Sales Elevation Experience is where we help founders develop and design lead generation machines that bring in high quality, high converting leads for their education companies on repeat. Get more details in the show notes. Now, let's bring this show home. I didn't ask you about this when we got on our call 26 minutes ago, because I really wanted to ask this question organically.
Okay.
If you're watching this on YouTube, you can see that there is a picture over the shoulder of Dr. Tara, of Betty White. And she is just like staring at me right now, like just protecting you. And she's got this colorful outfit on. And so, what is the connection and I could tell the story probably, but you tell. What's the connection between you and that wonderful painting over your shoulder?
So there's four of them. There's all four of the Golden Girls. You just can't see all of them.
Yeah,
Um,
okay.
but when I moved into this house, everything was very gray, and I am not a gray human. I love color. And I moved into this house shortly after my dad passed away.
Hmm.
And my dad loved the Golden Girls. So when
Hmm.
I was young, we used to watch Nick at Night. And especially I personally think I'm a Dorothy, who is also a teacher but has an amazing wit. She was always my
Hmm.
favorite, so she's on the other side. But uh,
Okay.
but yeah, like that team of women, like just complemented each other so well, and such a great show that we can watch it today, and it hasn't, to me, it hasn't aged terribly. Like some
Yeah.
shows, you can watch it and it's still funny, even though those women were supposed to be in their 50s. So now as women we look at it, we're like, wait a minute, like that's not what we're gonna look like in 10 years. But yeah, like so it's like a little piece of my dad that I get to keep with me, but in like a fun way and in an encouraging way. And yeah, like thinking about those four independent, amazing, strong characters that at the time didn't look or act like, Knots Landing or whatever was on at the
Yeah.
time. They were their own thing with their own personalities and their own humor and wit and strength. So I love the Golden Girls.
And you have, I'll pull the thread through, really recently, through a book, through LinkedIn, through a conversation like this with a camera in front of you, embraced being this person in public. And I think it's going to serve you so well. It's going to serve your business so well. And I know most importantly to you, I think it's going to serve those students so well. And I know at the end of the day, that's most likely the most important part of this to you. Is that right?
It is, of course. I mean, helping students is always my number one goal. But like also not just in the classroom, but looking at their lives as um, it doesn't just have to be if you're smart in school or you do well in school or you get in a certain GPA. Like once we all know, once we get out in I hate the term real world, but once we're out there, that stuff doesn't matter. It's everything that you've learned along the way and your strengths and your weaknesses and asking for your needs and advocating for yourself. To me, that's more important than grades on a paper any day of the week. So
Yeah. I couldn't agree with you more. I have been lucky enough, and so is our community in the Ed Sales Elevation Experience, have kind of watched you embrace this. And now, thank you for telling this particular story to us, and we'll all cheer you on wherever you are. LinkedIn, your book, the remake of the Golden Girls, maybe.
if
That
anyone's
would be
listening, I'd like
amazing.
to be involved.
Yeah, I believe it. I believe it. I mean, I can only see the two right now, but now I get the full picture. And we have all gotten the full picture of Dr. Tara Williams, and we appreciate it. So thank you so much for being on the show today.
Well, and thank you, Josh, for and your program for getting me out of my shell and showing me it's all right. Even the other people that I started with, um, who are predominantly male, are still struggling with the same thing that I was struggling with. Like, no, LinkedIn isn't used for that. Like, we don't need that. We have to show this business side of us. We have to be a CEO, right? Where you really showed, no, like humanizing yourself and telling your story and making yourself vulnerable is super important. So you were a very integral part of my journey. And I just want to say thank you to you.
I'm always in your corner. Thank you for being on the show.
All right. Thank you.
All right, that's it for this episode of the Ed Sales Edge. Thanks for joining us. If you sell into education, the goal of this show is very simple: to help you stop guessing what actually moves deals in a system where trust matters. If you want to go deeper, join us inside the Entourage, our private community for education founders and operators selling into schools. You'll see the details in the show notes. If this episode helped you think more clearly, That's great. Subscribe, like it, and share it with another founder in the education space. Until next time, get clear, build trust, set up a system for sales, and keep earning your edge.